My fusion system. Fusing 1,000 chickens at the start. Chapters 346 to 360. Chapter 346. Platinum Tier Seafolks. It depends on my mood. Watson snorted, stood up, and walked out. Elena and the other two followed him, encompassing Alice in the middle as if they were afraid she would run away. They walked out together with the hundreds of slaves that Watson had bought. The auctioneer did not feel angry at Watson's arrogance. Instead, he looked around as if it was normal. Dear esteemed guests, I'm very sorry, but that auction has ended. I hope that everyone can leave this place in an orderly manner and come back again next time. He planned to wait for Watson to leave before clearing that place and handing the statue of the goddess of misfortune to the higher-ups. Perhaps the higher-ups from the Severed Fingers gang would see the platinum tier items he had paid and would be so happy that they rewarded him with tens of thousands of gold coins or even gave him a promotion and a raise. The auctioneer's eyes lit up, and he began to fantasize about his beautiful future. The wealthy people on the scene stood up and looked at each other with strange expressions. They did not feel sorry or sad because they did not get the item. They learned an important piece of news. The Ptolemy family had come for the mermaid princess time, and they were willing to fork out tens of millions of gold coins for her, and their second young master was not so cowardly. It seems that we have underestimated the Ptolemy family's second young master. He is not a coward, and he is also very good at planning. His strength is not weak either. At the very least, he is not an ordinary person who can conjure gold coins out of thin air. He must be a powerful mage. Previously, everyone in the floating city felt that the eldest young master would inherit the Ptolemy family. Therefore, many people turned to Mike, and many of them were my friends. Now it seems like Casey is just hiding his true self. I want to tell my friends about this so that they can choose their side carefully. The Ptolemy family did not hand over such an important matter to the eldest young master, Mike. They had chosen Casey instead. The reason for that was very intriguing. No matter what, Casey was in the limelight. Many people had seen him. Perhaps that news would spread throughout the floating city, renewing everyone's impression of that useless young master. Watson had already arrived at a spacious street outside the Iris Flower Tavern. He was unaware of what the wealthy people in the auction house had thought about the matter. Elena, I did not disappoint you. I helped you rescue Alice. Now you are free to go. Thank you, young Master Casey. Elena and the other two thanked him excitedly. If it were not for the people coming and going, they would have knelt and bowed to Watson. If it were not for Watson, they would not have been able to save Alice. That was their first reaction after entering the auction house. In terms of wealth, they were inferior to the rich people there. In terms of strength, they would not have been able to rescue Alice out in front of everyone. Many of the staff members there were gold-tier elites. You're welcome. This isn't a safe place either. You guys should leave. Watson shook his head and was about to say something when a cold hand gently grabbed his shoulder. He subconsciously turned his head and realized that it was the youngest mermaid. The mermaid stared at him with her big round eyes. The corners of her mouth curled up slightly. Brother Watson, thank you for everything you've done for me. This is the second time you've saved me. You know who I am? Watson was a little stunned. Yes, when I was locked in the fish tank and transported to the stage, I heard your voice and knew that you were here. Your voice is different from others, it has a special charm to it. Every mermaid is an expert singer, so I can hear the difference. After seeing Sister Elena, I am even more certain that you are Brother Watson. The sea folks generally hated humans, especially Elena and the others. The humans had captured and sold their people, their hatred toward humans was deep-rooted. It was impossible for them to travel with a stranger, let alone a human who had captured them before. Alice, I did not expect you to be so smart. I had no choice but to look like that. I hope you won't tell anyone. Watson gave her a silent look, and Alice immediately understood. She tightened her grip on his shoulder, and the smile on her face became even sweeter. Young Master Casey, what do you plan to do with those slaves? Elena interrupted the conversation between Alice and Watson, pointing at the group of numb-looking slaves behind her. If we release them, they will be captured again if they are still in the floating city. We might as well solve the problem now. Elena, please send them away. If any of them are unwilling to live with the sea tribes, send them out of the city. As for where they will go after that, it's up to them. Young Master Casey, are you serious? Elena and the slaves were shocked when they heard Watson's words. As slaves, they had heard of Casey. They had thought that he bought them because he wanted to torture them twice as much to earn back the money he had spent on them. They were still worried about their fate. Unexpectedly, young Master Casey had decided to let them go. "When have I ever lied to you? Leave before I change my mind." Watson's expression was calm. He was still Casey, and those slaves were his property. No one would stop them from leaving the city. "I understand, young Master Casey. Later, I will ask those people for their opinions. I will see who is willing to leave with us. If they agree, I will bring them to the sea so that they will not be harmed by humans again." Elena glanced at the slaves with a pitying gaze. After being a slave for so long, they were touched when they heard that someone had allowed them to be free. How hateful were those people who imprisoned those girls. "Speaking of the sea, young Master Casey, the two people who were bidding against you at the auction, they are..." Whoosh! Before Elena could finish her words, a piercing sound rang out. Then, a sky-blue arrow condensed from water elements flew out from the air and flew straight toward Watson's chest. The arrow had yet to touch his body when the powerful force created a ravine on the ground, causing gravel to fly everywhere. Watson frowned and stomped his feet. Immediately, a fire elemental law domain appeared beneath his feet. A flaming volcano erupted like a mountain, forming a wall of fire around him. The wall of fire and the water arrow collided, canceling each other until only a wisp of white smoke remained. Who is so bold to attack the Crystal Palace? The passers-by screamed as they fled. As they ran, they looked around them angrily. The Crystal Palace had a rule about grudges. They were not allowed to attack there. Otherwise, they would face the combined pursuit of the Ptolemy family and the Severed Fingers gang. The Crystal Palace was a place for entertainment and was also the primary source of funds for the various factions. They knew that a stable environment was more conducive to development. While everyone was searching, the attacker soon revealed himself. It was a burly man in a black robe. He was holding a longbow made of water, and the bowstring was still trembling. Obviously, he was the one who shot that arrow. A law domain? I can't believe it. So many people had criticized the Ptolemy family. They said that the second young master was not even an Iron Tier elite. Yet, he is actually a Platinum Tier warrior. The burly man spoke with great interest. 3 water arrows appeared in his right hand again, and he placed them on the bowstring. The 3 water arrows shot toward Watson at the same time. The 3 arrows fused in midair, turning into a long, thick blue whale that spanned dozens of meters. It raised its head and roared, swinging its tail as it smashed down toward Watson. The houses along the way were relatively close to each other. The roofs were overturned by the blue whale made of water elements. The ground where the whale passed by had collapsed. Waves shot out from the ground, converging into an ocean in midair as similar blue whales appeared in the water, one after another. The passers-by on both sides of the road were terrified. Then, they covered their mouths and noses. The anti-gravity force on their clothes rose, and they could not breathe. In just an instant, the ground had turned into an ocean, making people feel as if they were in the middle of a storm and a whirlpool. Platinum Tier secret skill of the Sea Tribe, Sea Spirit's Breath. The man with the bow released a violent aura from his body. It blew the hood off his head, revealing a man with a rugged appearance and blue curly hair. 2 teardrop-shaped gems were hanging on the man's ears, and there were 3 white wave-shaped tattoos on his face. He looked very rough. The most surprising thing was the aura on that man's body. It was the kind of aura that only Platinum Tier elites would have. The space around the man was the most viscous area of the sea. Bubbles rose and twisted. It's the Sea Tribe. He's from a Sea Tribe elite. Some of the people recognized the man and wanted to speak. However, the moment they opened their mouths, a mouthful of seawater poured and stopped their words. With the burly man's feet as the center, the seawater shot out from the ground and spread in all directions. The water was too fast. Initially, the Crystal Palace had used the power from the sea god's trident to form a waterless land. At that moment, because of the burly man, that dry land was like a balloon filled with water. The crowd was at a loss because of the rapidly spreading water flow, not to mention Watson, who was at the center of the attack. The blue whales formed were rushing in his direction. The impact of each of those whales was not weaker than a landslide. Hundreds of blue whales rushed toward him, and even more so when he was in the water. An invisible vortex had already wrapped around his arm. The only ones who could move freely in the water were Alice, Elena, and the other sea folks. However, they were also anxious at that moment. No, Lord Owen, that is not the real Casey. He was the one who saved us. His name is Watson, Elena shouted in her native sea tribe language. Her voice was transmitted toward the burly man named Owen. The sea tribe language could be spoken in the water because it was used in such situations. What did you say? The burly man's expression changed. He wanted to stop, but his speed was too fast and fierce. He could not stop. He could only watch as hundreds of giant blue whales stacked on top of each other and swallowed Watson. Chapter 347. Send them all away. Your Highness, I'm sorry I'm late. This is not a place to stay for long. The news of my appearance has probably already spread. If we stay here for a long time, I'm afraid that there will be human platinum tier elites coming to attack us. After seeing Watson swallowed by the blue whale and knowing that there was no saving him, Owen went to Alice and the others. His voice compressed millions of tons of seawater to the extreme and gave it spirituality, allowing it to track its enemies like a fish freely. The water column condensed to a certain degree could already pierce through steel, not to mention the tens of millions of tons of turbulent seawater. The seawater was like a saw that could easily cut off any human body that came into contact with it. At the same time, those overwhelmed by the seawater would have their bodies crushed. Their organs and bones would be pounded into meat paste. The shattered houses and solid walls around them were proof of that. Brother Owen, why did you attack Brother Watson? Is he all right? Alice did not respond to Owen's words. Instead, she looked at the place where Watson had disappeared. The water pressure there exploded where hundreds of giant blue whales collided. There was only a white bubble as far as the eye could see, and even though the space had become unstable, black cracks had appeared in the surroundings. Alice bit her lips tightly. She seemed sad, like a doll that had lost its soul. Your Highness, the Sea Emperor is waiting for us outside the city. If you have anything to say, please wait until we return to the sea. I will personally apologize to you. Owen felt a pang of heartache when he saw her face. As the bravest warrior of the sea tribe, Alice had been under his care since she was young, just like his daughter. Therefore, after Alice disappeared, his heart was filled with anger. He decided to ignore the risk and went ashore with the Sea Emperor to find Alice. Finally, after only a day, they had killed a few people from the Severed Fingers gang and found out that Alice would be auctioned that day. Therefore, they brought all the sea folk royal family's wealth and were prepared to buy Alice at the auction. They left quietly. Who would have thought that their plan, which should have been flawless, would be ruined by Watson? No one knew what method Watson used to create a platinum-tier goddess of misfortune statue on the spot. Even a pearl worth hundreds of millions of gold coins was inferior to it. There was no other way. Since they could not take Alice away quietly, they could only make a big fuss and take Alice by force. At that moment, after listening to Elena and Alice's words, he realized that young Master Casey was actually a fake. During the process of gathering information, Owen heard that Casey was the first group of people to take Alice away. That was why he did not inform Alice and the others before he launched a sneak attack in anger. He knew that he had killed the wrong person, but Owen had no way to make up for it. He could only take Alice and the others away and then make a long-term plan. Boom! Suddenly, they heard a violent sound from the center of the ocean, accompanied by a ball of scorching heat. Platinum tier spell, Chain Vermilion Nova. Golden red suns rose one after another and fell on the blue whales swimming in the ocean. After absorbing the golden red sun, the blue whales expanded infinitely, turning into gas. Then, it exploded, and dry wind blew out from within the area. It eliminated the water vapor in the air. Initially, Owen's platinum tier spell could fill the entire crystal palace with the water. Other people would be busy trying to escape, and he could have successfully run with Alice. However, as the red suns rose, the seawater in the entire crystal palace instantly evaporated, turning into white clouds that floated into the sky, forming a continuous layer of clouds. Many passers-by trapped in the water almost drowned. They coughed violently. They fell to the ground with disheveled hair. They looked like drowned rats. The wreckage of houses that had been floating in the ocean also fell with a rustle, piling up into a small hill on the ground. In that mess, Watson's disguise, Casey, was floating in the air. The bandages wrapped around his arms were dancing in the air, and the phantoms of thousands of arms and hundreds of eyes appeared behind him, constantly flickering. If it were not for the wounds on his body and face, he would have looked like a god of war. How is that possible? Owen looked at the sky in shock. His face was filled with disbelief. Others might think that he caused the wounds on Watson's body, but he knew very well that the attack did not harm his opponent. Those wounds were already on Watson's body. He had just his strongest move to kill Casey due to his anger. Even though the Sea Tribe's Platinum Tier elites were not as prevalent as the humans, their peak strength was not inferior. That was also why the Sea Tribe was often captured and sold by humans, but their race was not exterminated. Even elites of the same level should have been seriously injured when confronted with his enraged attack. When he looked over, the fake Casey was still alive. Who exactly was that person? So, Watson is fine. He scared us to death. Elena and the others let out a sigh of relief. At the same time, they were a bit surprised. They knew Owen's strength very well. He was considered one of the top Platinum Tier warriors. Otherwise, Owen would not have dared to come here alone to save them. However, Watson had blocked Owen's attack. That youth's strength had once again exceeded their expectations. It hurts. Watson unfolded his Einherjar body and used the illusory arm that extended out from his back to rub his body. Owen's attack had been terrifying. Even though he had the Einherjar body, he still felt the pain. However, that was all to it. If it were not for his identity as Casey, he would not have been able to reveal too much of his strength. He only needed to use his absolute reflex spell to deal with Owen's wails. "It's young Master Casey. He saved us?" Many people on the street raised their heads with difficulty after escaping. They were surprised to see Watson floating in the air. They had never heard of Casey being able to fly. However, he was still able to survive a single attack from a Platinum Tier Marine warrior. That meant that Casey was not weak, so it was not surprising that he could fly. I can't believe the good-for-nothing Casey, who only knows how to harm women, has such strength. More and more people raised their heads and imprinted that scene in their minds. "Your Highness, let's go." As he felt the hateful gazes from all directions, Owen knew that his plan busted. He snapped back to his senses and carried Alice on his shoulders. Then, he rushed out of the Crystal Palace. "The sea folks want to leave. Stop them, quickly." Silver and Gold Tier elites rose into the air. Since many rich and powerful people had gathered in the Crystal Palace, it was impossible for those people to go out without their bodyguards. When the entire Crystal Palace was underwater, all the bodyguards did their best to protect their master. They had no time to care about anything else. Then, the seawater had disappeared, and those people did not have the same worries. Thousands of people flew in the sky. Countless combat aura attacks and spells landed beside Owen, causing the sky to explode with brilliant fireworks. It was not a big deal for Owen. He was not affected by those explosions. However, the three mermaids with him, Elena, Bella, and Rose, were in a terrible situation. The Gold Tier women were covered in blood from the explosions, and they were on the verge of collapse. DMN it. After the first few thousand people, more people appeared from the Crystal Palace. Some of them even came from the passage outside the Crystal Palace. Owen cursed in his heart. He looked anxious. The longer he dragged it out, the lower chance he would get to escape. It was a joke if a Platinum Tier elite went on a rescue mission and died doing that. It's all because of that person's magic. Owen looked downward. Then, he realized that Watson had disappeared. He narrowed his eyes. At that moment, a cold voice suddenly came from above his head. "You attacked me just now, and now it's my turn." Platinum Tier combat technique, simplified invincible punch. Owen turned his head and noticed that Watson had somehow appeared above his head. His left hand reached out to grab his collar and threw him into the sky. Then, Watson's fist enlarged in his eyes. That fist was wrapped in bandages, but in an instant, the bandages had unraveled. The bandages and the rest of the world had disappeared from Owen's eyesight. In an instant, he could only see a bruised fist. He did not think he could dodge it. Even his screams were suppressed in his throat, unable to be transmitted outward. Boom! A muffled explosion burst. Owen, Alice, Elena, and the others nearby were sent flying like mosquitoes. They spun and flew into the sky, directly smashing a fist-shaped hole that stretched for hundreds of meters into the Crystal Palace's dome. That punch even penetrated the floating city's surface, allowing people to see the blue sky through the hole. A punch that sent a platinum-tier seafolk flying. That's young Master Casey. Countless people in the Crystal Palace saw the figure in the sky. Their jaws were wide open, enough to fit an egg. Even the silver tier and gold tier elites surrounding and intercepting him gave up on pursuing him at that moment. They were staring at Watson with complicated expressions on their faces. Casey could defeat an elite that none of them could even catch. They had called him useless, but could they even say the same thing after that? Splash! Just as everyone was stunned by Watson's punch, the sound of boiling water suddenly came from the hole above their heads. A waterfall like turbulent flow swirled down the hole and began to pour into the Crystal Palace. Since the protective shield from the sea god's trident was outside of Crystal Palace, the attack had pierced through it. Seawater had started to pour again. Run! Don't bother about those sea creatures anymore. Go back and protect Master. The people on the streets became chaotic and began to move along the passage toward the floating city. The elites in the sky also flew back to their masters. Watson stood in the air and lowered his head. His eyes fell on the hundreds of slaves who were trembling on the ground. He had punched them on purpose. Of course, he did not use any force. He only wanted to send Owen and the others away. Of course, it would not be easy to take his punch. It was Owen's fault for attacking him so rashly. After sending all the sea folks away, it will be those slaves' turn. It's not enough to just send them away. Watson smirked as he observed the slaves, some of whom had shackles around their wrists and ankles, emerging from the rumored underground location. He intended to use that as an excuse to free all the slaves in the Crystal Palace. Chapter 348. An invitation from the Sea Tribe. Outside the floating city, a woman in a black robe stood at the entrance to the east of the floating city. She looked worried. At that moment, she had already revealed her face. Her beautiful blue hair fluttered in the wind, and her hair that was wet from the seawater stuck to her face. Her jade-green eyes seemed to contain stars. A trident-shaped tattoo was engraved on her smooth forehead. Her name was Poseidon, the Sea Tribe's empress. All the other sea emperors had consistently been named Poseidon. Some said that it was a divine name bestowed by the sea god. No matter their previous name, they would need to change to that name to enjoy the sea god's protection. As one of the Sea Tribe's 3 platinum-tier elites, she was not good at fighting, so she was responsible for guarding the entrance. Owen hasn't come out after so long, and there seems to be a violent explosion in the floating city. Did something happen? The woman's voice was a little hoarse, and she looked worried. At that moment, a thunder-like shout suddenly came from the floating city, causing her expression to change. Lord Poseidon, we're out. Quickly, open the gate. The floating city had a barrier in the air. If one wanted to enter that place, the only way was to open the gate and pass through the underground waterways. That was the city's protection measure, but it was not difficult for Poseidon. Great sea god, please grant me your supreme power. Let ignorant creatures witness the mighty power of the sea. As she chanted, the lake where the floating city was located began to churn. Huge waves hundreds of meters high suddenly surged from the lake. An even more majestic giant formed from the water elements was holding an ancient-looking trident in one hand in the waves. He swung it down at the gate of the floating city. Boom! With a loud sound, several cracks appeared on the huge stone gate that weighed dozens of tons. It shattered with a loud sound. Violent seawater surged out from the city and merged with the rolling water surface outside the city. Waterspouts that shot into the sky appeared one after another. The ships outside the city were blown away. Even huge ships were blown dozens of meters into the air when the waterspouts rammed into them. They fell heavily into the water and shattered the hull. The crew members were thrown off the ships and fell into the water. They screamed and were dizzy from being washed away. While Poseidon did that, several figures flew over from the city. The leader was Owen, and he held Alice in his arms. When he landed in front of Poseidon, Owen's knees buckled, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Owen, are you injured? Who injured you? Was there someone that strong in the city? Poseidon was a little puzzled. Lord Poseidon, let's talk about it later. Let's leave now. Wait a moment. At that moment, Alice suddenly broke free from Owen's embrace and landed on the surface of the sea. She pointed at the city and said, "Look, Your Highness, now is not the time to look around." Owen smiled bitterly, but he could not help but turn his head. When he saw the scene behind him, even though he was a platinum tier elite with an extraordinary mind, he was stunned. The floating city behind him was filled with people rising into the sky. Most of those people were wearing chains and shackles. They were obviously slaves. There were tens of thousands of them. As they rose into the sky, the chains on their bodies broke. Soon, they were in the sky. A translucent eggshell-shaped light barrier appeared in the sky. It emitted an intense light that prevented them from continuing to rise. At that moment, Watergate City's barrier was activated. However, those slaves did not stop rising in the face of the enormous barrier. Instead, they rose even faster. Just as they were about to collide with the barrier and break their heads, a person appeared below the barrier and punched the sky. Crack! The barrier shattered, and a huge fist appeared in the clouds. Despicable Sea Tribe. They caused chaos in the Crystal Palace, and then they took the opportunity to abduct all the slaves in the city. I will never agree to your actions. Watson was the one who shattered the barrier. He took a step forward and activated the teleportation spell. Tens of thousands of slaves followed him to Poseidon and the others. Kid, what are you talking about? It's clearly you. Owen looked at the young man in front of him and spat out another mouthful of blood. However, at that time, he was angry. Watson had taken advantage of the time they saved Alice to release those slaves, but he had blamed them instead. Was he really a good person? Why did he not feel like it? Despicable sea creatures, are you speechless in front of me? Then let me end your sins, absolute gravity. Watson stomped his feet, and the violent sea surface around him instantly calmed. A hundreds of meter-tall sea giant collapsed into a pool of calm water, and the huge water tornadoes that connected the sky and the earth had also disappeared. The residents who were about to be torn apart by the waterspout emerged from the surface of the water, one after another. They panted heavily and looked at Watson. The Ptolemy family's second young master is fighting the sea folks? They could not believe their eyes. They rubbed their eyes as if they were dreaming. When did Casey become so strong that he could destroy hundreds of meters of huge waves with a single step? Watson stretched his right hand toward Owen. Sleep underwater forever, invincible punch. The surface of the lake exploded. Watson and a few members of the Sea Tribe had disappeared, leaving only the surface of the lake and a group of people who were still in shock. 10 minutes later, at the entrance of Lake Priest, where the floating city was located, there was an endless sea in front of them. The land had disappeared. Watson floated on the water and removed his disguise. The sea folks were in front of him while the tens of thousands of slaves were behind him. Everyone who saw his real face, except for Alice and the others who had already known about it, was shocked. Owen and Poseidon were surprised that a teenager had been the one to save them. The slaves were astonished that the person was not Casey. Friends from the Sea Tribe, this is the end. Miss Alice, I hope you won't get captured again. Watson smiled at the sea folks. He turned his head to look at the slaves behind him. You are free now. You can go wherever you want, as long as you are far away from the floating city. Of course, if any of you want to live with the Sea Tribe, you can stay here. The slaves calmed their shocked emotions and responded one after another. I am willing to stay with the sea folks. After all, my family was brutally murdered by the slave traders. Even if they let me leave, I have nowhere to go. My hometown is in the forest of eternity. The slave traders abducted me. I want to go home. My family is still waiting for me. In the end, a small number of people had chosen to stay. Most of them decided to leave. For those who wanted to go, Watson cast the gods' blessings to help them recover their strength and then a large-scale teleportation spell. He teleported them to a place far away from the floating city to ensure that they were not discovered. Then, he handed the thousands of people who chose to stay to Poseidon. Madam, I can see that you are one of the Sea Tribe's leaders. I hope you can treat these people well. Don't discriminate against them just because they used to be slaves. Of course. Poseidon nodded blankly. She hesitated for a moment and said, Are you sure you want to give those people to me for free and not ask for a reward? Her scalp was a little numb. There were many silver and gold tier elites amongst the slaves. Furthermore, they were all gorgeous. Typically, those slaves would cost thousands of gold coins. She had planned to save only her daughter, Alice. Unexpectedly, she managed to save Alice and gained so many people. However, the other party did not ask for anything. What else would I want? Keep Alice by my side? Kid, I'm warning you. Alice is the Sea Tribe's princess. If you dare to disrespect her, I'll. Halfway through his words, Owen spat out another mouthful of blood. I was just joking. You don't have to be so agitated, Watson shrugged. He would not be staying in that city for long anyway. The less contact he had with others, the better. Unexpectedly, after he spoke, Alice's eyes lit up. She gently tugged at the corner of Poseidon's clothes. Mother, I want to stay with Brother Watson. Alice, what are you saying? I said I wanted to stay with Brother Watson. Mother, didn't you teach me to repay another's kindness? Even though I'm weak and can't do anything, I can stay with Brother Watson and help him clean his room or cook. I can still do such things. If I really can't, I can help him earn money. After all, my tears can turn into pearls. Alice, you. Poseidon looked at Watson and then at Alice, whose eyes were fixed on Watson. Her expression became serious. When a Sea Tribe royal family member fell in love with someone, their tears would become pearls. Had she fallen in love with that young man? Yes, Lord Poseidon. Watson has helped us a lot along the way. Even if we don't reward him, we should at least take him to our city and hold a banquet to reward him. Elena, are you joking? In the hundreds of years that we have lived in Atlantis, not a single human has set foot in it. That is the rule, and you want him to enter our city? Do you know that it violates our ancestors' laws? Owen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and reprimanded Elena, who was helping him. Elena pursed her lips and did not say a word. Young Master Watson, since my daughter and subordinates have said so, it seems that they have indeed received a lot of care from you. In addition, you have given us so many people. It would be inappropriate for me not to thank you. You may follow us to our kingdom, Atlantis. Thank you for your kind intentions, Your Excellency. However, I have other matters to attend to, so I won't be going with you. Initially, Watson had been preparing to attend the Ptolemy family's trial that day. However, Casey had called him away. Since it was already noon, he should head to the Ptolemy manor. Kid, Lord Poseidon has graciously invited you, yet you dared to refuse her? I'm warning you, don't be so ungrateful. Owen spat out blood again as he spoke, while Watson revealed a helpless expression. What was going on with that platinum-tier elite in front of him? He had rejected Poseidon's invitation, but Owen said he was ungrateful and did not conform to the rules. What exactly did he want him to do? Young Master Watson, it's better for you to come with us. After all, those slaves are land dwellers. They might not be able to live in the sea. Although they wanted to stay, you should send them back ashore if they are not used to living with us. Don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time. Poseidon had a reasonable explanation. Watson thought for a moment and nodded. All right, then I'll go with you. Watson trailed behind Poseidon. He saw Poseidon chant a few incantations, and the ocean in front of him immediately parted to form a downward passage. With thousands of slaves in tow, he walked into the divided sea. Watson did not know that his actions had caused a massive uproar in the floating city. Chapter 349. Our hero, Casey. My head hurts so much. Casey woke up in the blinding sunlight and found himself lying on the ground. The ropes that bound his body were torn, and his clothes were wet as if he had been soaked in water. His eyes widened as a memory flooded into his mind. Watson was negotiating with a mermaid that he had once captured. He even tied him to a chair and knocked him unconscious with a vase. DMNU, Watson? I will definitely not let you off. Casey screamed as he struggled to get up from the chair. During that time, he had touched the wounds on his body that had not yet healed. He was in so much pain that he broke out in cold sweat. The scene he saw after he stood up made him even more confused. The wall had been smashed, and a huge hole had appeared. The things in the room were in disarray. The bed, the table, and many chairs were shattered into pieces. He did not know when the roof had disappeared. The sun shone directly on him from the dome, and he could not help but turn his head away. There was a loud noise from outside. It seemed that many people were walking past, and he did not know what to say. Suddenly, the footsteps outside stopped near the room he was in, and the sound became apparent. I heard a scream from inside that room. There might be survivors. Everyone, follow me in to take a look. I hope that person's injuries aren't too serious. There are currently too many injured people at the Crystal Palace. There are at least tens of thousands of them. We can't provide enough priests to treat them anymore. Then, a few people walked into the room. When they saw Casey, who was in a sorry state, their expressions changed simultaneously. Who are you? What happened here? Casey asked. As soon as he finished speaking, the new arrivals knelt in front of him, trembling. Their eyes were filled with respect and a hint of admiration. Young Master Casey. You are young Master Casey, right? When you disappeared from the lake surface outside the floating city, everyone thought you had lost your life in the battle with the sea tribe. They did not expect that you would come back alive. This means that you killed those sea folks, including that platinum tier sea folk, right? Battle with the sea folks? Platinum tier sea folk? A few big question marks appeared above Casey's head. He was dumbfounded. When had he ever done such a thing? Was he crazy, or were those people in front of him crazy? When they saw Casey's puzzled expression, they looked at him as if they understood what he had gone through. We understand. You don't want us to publicize what has happened here. After all, you've been hiding your strength. However, many people have seen what you've done. Now that most of the people in the Crystal Palace know about your power, it's impossible to hide it even if you want to. Wait a minute, what happened just now? Casey's expression darkened. Those people spoke so truthfully that it did not seem like they were lying to him. He had fainted there and did not do anything at all, yet those people had seen him outside. There was only one possibility, and that was that someone had used his identity. Watson's face flashed through his mind, and he gritted his teeth. He had knocked him out, and he had also used his identity to cause trouble. That B** starred. Is Watson a good person? It had been half an hour since those people had found him. They had described what had happened outside, including how Casey had been to the auction house and upstaged everyone there. All the women had fallen in love with him. He even bought all the items in the auction house and fused them into a powerful platinum tier item. Apart from that, Casey also heard how he had bought the mermaid princess and ended up fighting about 300 rounds with the sea folks who had come to rescue her. He had successfully defeated them and protected the Crystal Palace. In just half an hour, Watson's position in Casey's heart had changed from a B** starred to a good person. He had already made the mental preparation. If Watson had changed into his identity and did something terrible, he would persuade his father to refuse Watson's request to participate in the trial and take revenge on Watson. However, he was no longer sure. Are you serious? People outside are saying that I'm a hero of the floating city? That's right, young Master Casey. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid that more than half of the people in the Crystal Palace would have died because of the attack. But now, most of them are only injured. If you don't believe me, you can go out and take a look. The few of them had been talking for half an hour, but Casey felt as if it had been a lifetime. One of the man's lips twitched. He thought that young Master Casey was a fine actor. No wonder they had been deceived by the rumors, thinking that he was a good-for-nothing young master. Take me there. Without any hesitation, Casey gestured for the people in front of him to get up and walk outside. When he arrived there, the midday sunlight once again stimulated his vision. After he got used to it, Casey found that the Iris Flower Tavern had almost been demolished. The street that it was connected to had widened. There were many people on the road, cleaning the shattered walls and transporting them outside. The residents were excited to see Casey. Young Master Casey. It's our hero, Casey. He's back. One of the residents had cried out in surprise, and it had caused a great uproar in the surroundings. What? Young Master Casey is back? Where is he? Let me see him. Casey had protected us, but he had disappeared when he fought the sea tribe. I was worried that he would be in danger. Fortunately, the gods blessed him, and he came back safely. The residents gathered around Casey and looked at him with burning eyes. Many of them were clapping enthusiastically. That scene made Casey feel a little better. Whenever he walked into the Crystal Palace, even if the people who saw him were respectful toward him, there was always a hint of disdain in their eyes. He knew that it was very difficult for the residents to have a good impression of him after what he had done. However, Casey felt good when he saw the heartfelt gratitude and respect of those people. Young Master Casey, can you tell us why you have been hiding your strength all this time, allowing others to insult you? And why did you show them today? Is it because the Ptolemy family no longer allowed you to conceal your strength, or is it because they knew that we were in danger? It must be because of the latter. A young girl toward Casey. She gave him a bouquet of flowers, her eyes flickering with light. I'm sorry, young Master Casey. That is my daughter. She hasn't had any education since she was young. Please don't mind her. Soon, A man dressed like a fisherman rushed up and grabbed his daughter. He kept winking at his daughter, signaling her to stay away from Casey. Unexpectedly, his daughter did not retreat. Instead, she showed a look of defiance. "Father, why do you keep pulling me? Do you still think young Master Casey is the B*****starred who raped young girls, did not pay for food, and even kicked an old lady who fell when she saw him? That's just his disguise. Even those things might not be real. The real young Master Casey must be who I think he is. He's a person worthy of my respect." Casey was a little embarrassed when he heard he had done all of that. The young girl's words about people respecting him were a little illusory. "I'm sorry, young Master Casey. I did not mean to criticize you. It's just that the rumors about you were too scary, causing me to be a little upset. It's my fault. You have saved us. How could I say that about you? I apologize." The fisherman slapped himself twice and kept bowing to Casey. "You don't have to do that. I won't do anything to you." After he stopped the fisherman, Casey revealed a warm smile. If it were any other time, such a lowly person would not have dared to be so disrespectful to him. He would have sent people to cut him up and throw him into the sea. He would have tied his daughter up and placed her on the bed. Fortunately, he still wanted to enjoy the taste of respect from everyone for a while longer. It would not be too late to kill those hateful commoners after he left the Crystal Palace. "Young Master Casey, you still haven't told us why you saved us." Everyone in the entire floating city wanted to know that. "I believe in your character. However, there are still people in the city, including my father, who do not understand you. I will definitely help you to clear up their misunderstanding." The young girl, who was the first to rush in front of Casey, continued to ask, her eyes twinkling with stars. Casey hesitated for a moment. He could not withstand the light in the young girl's eyes. "It's fine to say that I did all that, but it's not completely right. How should I put it? Is that my dear younger brother, Casey? What's wrong? You seem to be in a bit of a dilemma. You, the hero of the floating city, did not do all that. The person who did all that was actually someone else. You want to say that, right?" Suddenly, a voice interrupted Casey's words. A path opened up in the crowd. A man dressed in luxurious clothing brought a few guards toward Casey. When the man spoke, his handlebar mustache rose slightly. It was Casey's older brother, Mike. "I was wondering, Casey, how could you do such a feat? With your character, you should have hidden immediately after the disaster happened. You should have been knocked out by the collapsed houses and buried in the ruins. Sacrificing yourself for others and bravely fighting against the sea folks, that's not like you. Eldest brother, I know you have always looked down on me, but you are wrong this time. I really did do those things." Casey snorted coldly. He had not wanted to admit those things or only admit a part of them because whatever Watson did with his identity was too outrageous. It was fine if he went to the auction house to purchase all the items, but fighting against the platinum-tier sea folks was too excessive. He did not expect that Watson's strength would be so strong. It far exceeded his ability. If he admitted to that, he might be exposed in the future, which would be even more embarrassing. However, Casey suddenly wanted to admit it when his eldest brother deliberately went there to mock him with a hint of envy in his eyes that could not be hidden. "Forget it, Casey. I don't care whether you did it or not. Where's Watson? Father asked me to bring him to the trial. I went to the hotel to look for him, but they said that he had left with you very early in the day." "Watson? He can't hold his liquor. He left after 2 bottles of wine with me. As for where he is now, use your brain to find him." "Why are you asking me? Casey, I'm your eldest brother. How dare you talk to me like that?" Mike glared at him. "Even if I talk to you like that, what can you do to me? Teach me a lesson?" Casey pretended to raise his arm that was still wrapped in bandages. "I wonder which one of you is more resistant to beating, you or the platinum-tier sea folk." Mike was so angry that his face turned purple. He gritted his teeth and hesitated for a long time, but he still did not make a move. Instead, he waved at his subordinate. "Casey, well done. I didn't expect you to hide so well. However, don't expect the family head position to be yours just because you are strong. The competition for the position is based on one's intelligence rather than strength. Just you wait. I haven't lost yet." Then, Mike and the others left dejectedly. Casey smiled as he looked at their backs. "You haven't lost yet? You wouldn't have said such things in the past." Mike saw him as a bug. However, it seemed like Mike was afraid of him, He did not even dare to speak harshly to him. That high and mighty feeling made Casey feel excellent. He would scream if there were no one around. Chapter 350, Heaven and Hell. Young Master Casey, thank you for saving the Crystal Palace. If it weren't for you, our entire family would have drowned in the water. I spent a lot of effort to catch this basket of red herring. It's for you. You're too polite. It's what I should do. Young Master Casey, these 1,000 gold coins are a small gift from our master. I didn't expect that you would be able to recognize 20 different items in the auction house as belonging to a platinum tier item. You even managed to piece them together. After all, there aren't many platinum tier items in the entire kingdom. This matter is enough to go down in history. My master said that if you have time, you can go to the mansion to have tea with him at any time. He wants to have a serious discussion with you. I wonder if you would be willing to come? I'll definitely go. I have a good-looking daughter. I've always wanted to send her to a certain lord's house to work, but the noblemen have always had a bad reputation. I'm afraid that she'll be bullied there. But it's fine now. With an upright noble like young Master Casey around, I can rest assured after sending her to the Ptolemy Manor. I hope that you'll take care of my daughter in the future. Hee. Casey was on his way home to the Ptolemy Manor from the Crystal Palace. He had heard many praises all along the way. Whether it was the residents or the noblemen, none of them disrespected him. They even gave him a thumbs-up gesture. Some praised his profound knowledge of recognizing all kinds of relics in the auction house, while others praised him for spending a large sum of money to buy all the slaves under the bidders, resulting in fewer competitors being merciful and resourceful. Of course, most people praised him for his powerful strength and his long-hidden tolerance. Many noblemen who had supported his brother, Mike, had sent people to contact him. They wanted to be under his command instead. He had dozens of carriages worth of gifts. Casey did hire many carriages to follow him around. The coachman in charge of pulling the carriages had volunteered to help. They did not ask for a single cent from him. It felt good to be the hero. It was too good. On the way back, Casey felt like he was walking on clouds. He had not wanted to take credit for it before, but he had no way to refute it since Watson had disappeared. I have to think of a way to prevent Watson from stealing my credit. Casey pondered over that problem the entire way. When he was about to reach home, he finally thought of a way. Young Master Casey, we are willing to help you pull the carriage. We can't take your money. You are the floating city's hero and have saved countless people. It would be a sin to take your money. They were in front of the Ptolemy family's mansion. A few coachmen waved their hands at Casey, rejecting the money bag that Casey had handed them. It's a good habit for a nobleman to pay their way, but I understand your feelings. If you don't want any money, perhaps an autograph? Casey stood at the mansion's gate. His smile was very bright. After a long while, several coachmen took his autographs as if they were treasures and left happily. Casey combed his clothes with his bandaged hand and walked into the mansion calmly. Autographs were his way of doing things. No matter how much Watson imitated him, it would be impossible for him to copy his handwriting clearly. With his autograph, everyone would think that he was the one who did all that. I'm sorry, Watson. Why did you use my identity without my permission? You must have your own motives. Since you used me, then I'll just have to accept your achievements. That way, we'll be even. Then, Casey raised his head. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Lana, his sister. She was holding a parasol to cool down on the lawn. Lana was looking at him with a strange gaze, which made his hair stand on end. Casey pouted. Lana, don't you want to welcome me now that I'm back? When did you start staying here? Do you know what happened outside? If you're referring to young Master Casey's rescue of the floating city in the Crystal Palace, I know it very well. I've been here since this morning. I even saw your battle with the Sea Tribe with my own eyes. But after seeing it, I couldn't help but ask, is that really my brother? Of course, it's me. Who else would it be? Is there a second Casey in the city? I didn't show my strength before because I'm a low-key person. Is that so? Lana was still suspicious. I just saw my brother give a few autographs to the coachman outside. Since my brother is a low-key person, why did he do that? Lana, you're so annoying and so naggy. Send someone to get my things in the carriage outside. Quickly. Those are all gifts from the residents. Even though they're not valuable things, at least it's who they show their kindness to me. Also, where is father? I want to see him. Casey wanted to find Daniel to show off his achievements. 2 days ago, he had made a fool of himself in the family. If Daniel knew about what he supposedly did, he would probably be pleased. Perhaps, in his joy, he would immediately choose him as the successor. Father is in the study. Very well. Ignoring Lana's strange gaze mixed with pity, Casey quickly walked into the mansion with hope for a better future. He went to the study where his father was and knocked on the door. "Father, are you in there?" "It's me, Casey. Come in." A serious voice came from inside the door. Casey pushed the door open and walked into the room. He found Daniel sitting behind the desk, wearing a pair of black framed glasses. There was a thick stack of documents in front of him. He looked like he had a headache. Then, Daniel took off the glasses on his face and pinched the space between his eyebrows. After a moment, he opened his eyes and revealed a self-deprecating smile. "Isn't this Casey, the hero who saved the Crystal Palace and the floating city? In just one morning, you have gained so many titles. You are really my son." "Not at all, Father. It's all because of your good teaching and my hard work." Casey smiled proudly. Before he could hide his smile, Daniel suddenly stood up, grabbed the ink bottle on the table, and threw it at his head. There was a bang before Casey's head was bleeding. He sat on the ground, somewhat at a loss. He did not know why his father hit him. "Casey, haven't you always been hiding your strength? In fact, you have the strength to fight against Platinum-tier sea folk, right? Now that your strength has been exposed, there's no need to hide it in front of me." A dignified Platinum-tier elite couldn't even catch a bottle of ink? Daniel carried a wooden stick and walked in front of Casey. He gave Casey a fierce slap on the face. "Platinum-tier expert? A hero? Do you think that the title is beautiful and intoxicating? Those can be very good, but they have nothing to do with you. I've watched you grow up since you were young. How can I not know what kind of morals you have? Do you know how much trouble you've caused this time? Father, stop hitting me. Father, I know I'm wrong." Casey raised his bandaged hand with difficulty to cover his face. Every time the wooden stick in his father's hand fell on his arm, he felt a piercing pain. He cried. At the same time, he felt a wave of grievance. After that incident, the people in the city had changed their attitude toward him. Everyone praised him. Even his elder brother had to look him in the eye. Why was his father so angry? Daniel beat him until the wooden stick broke. He threw it away and sighed in disappointment. "You idiot. Ever since yesterday's incident, I should have locked you up and not allowed you to be free. I shouldn't have let you come into contact with that boy, Watson. Otherwise, you wouldn't have fallen for the trick." "Father, what happened?" "You don't even know what happened, yet you still dare to be complacent and call yourself a hero. I thought too highly of you when I said you were stupid. You're not stupid, you have no brain. I don't know why I have you as a son." It would have been better if Casey kept quiet. The moment he opened his mouth, Daniel became even angrier. Daniel said, "I guess you only know that someone impersonated you and spent a lot of money at the auction house to buy all the auction items. They even combined them into platinum-tier items. What you don't know is that not all the items in the auction house have been combined. The most precious item in the auction house is the mermaid princess, the one you caught last time. She's gone. Where do you think she is?" Casey was about to answer when cold sweat suddenly broke out. That was right. According to common sense, he must have bought the mermaid. Others would definitely think that she was with the Ptolemy family. However, judging from her father's reaction, the mermaid was not there. That's only the first point. The second point is that the person who impersonated you had been making waves in the auction house. However, he had used 10 million gold coins. That is not 1,000, nor 10,000 gold coins, but it was 10 million gold coins. You should know that the Ptolemy family only has tens of millions of gold coins. As a young master, you have already squandered more than 10 million gold coins in the auction house. Where did that money come from? What will the other families think? What will His Majesty think when he finds out about that? Cold sweat broke out on Casey's body. Lastly, and most importantly, did you know that the person who impersonated you bought the mermaid in the auction house and released tens of thousands of slaves in the Crystal Palace and the floating city at the same time? Although the person who impersonated you said that the sea tribe took those hostages, the noblemen in the city did not believe him. Many people suspect that those tens of thousands of slaves are here. Let's forget about it. Some suppliers even asked if they could raise the price by 50 times when they sell the goods to us in the future. Do you know what our family looks like in the eyes of the various nobles in the city? Casey shook her head. Daniel gritted his teeth. In their eyes, we are currently earning a large amount of money through an unknown channel. With the mermaid princess in our hands, we will only have more money in the future and don't know how to control ourselves. We will only be spendthrift fools. However, we don't have that much money. If someone asks us for money and we can't come up with it, they might think that we are being too stingy by not agreeing to it even though we can do it. Over time, they will ostracize us and even hate us. You don't think the consequences are serious? Are you still happy about it? Daniel almost shouted. After he finished speaking, he seemed to have aged a lot. Forget it, Casey. I shouldn't have had high hopes for you from the start. This is not your fault, but mine. Stay away from Watson in the future. A genius of that level is not someone you can come into contact with. Also, from today onward, you are to stay at home for 3 months and you are not allowed to go out. Father, I agree to your request. I will stay far away from Watson, but not going out for 3 months is really too long. Half a year. Father, shut up. If you speak again, I will ground you for a year. Father, I admit that I'm wrong. Casey collapsed on the ground as if he had lost all his strength. The beautiful fantasy that had emerged in his heart was destroyed. A moment ago, he was still in heaven, but he had fallen into hell since then. Chapter 351. The Fusion of the 12 Golden Palaces. Atlantis. At that moment, Watson was strolling in the underwater kingdom. Even though it was called a kingdom, Atlantis was only a little larger than the floating city of Stanley. It was different from the buildings on the surface. Its architecture had an ancient style. It was similar to a temple. The pillars outside the temple were covered with glowing seaweed and corals that were unique to the ocean. The buildings in the entire kingdom were arranged in a ring-shaped ladder. However, that ladder did not go upward but downward. An altar in the center, pulled by 8 iron cables dozens of meters thick, had a bottomless abyss beneath it. Occasionally, colorful bubbles would appear from the abyss. It was astonishingly beautiful. That is the city where the sea folks live, Atlantis. Compared to the cities on land, it is unique, indeed. Watson stared at the buildings and sighed. A sky-blue water elemental law domain spread out beneath his feet. It covered hundreds of meters, preventing thousands of slaves from being drowned in seawater and suffocating. Poseidon and the others were floating in front of him. Then, Owen turned around with a smug look on his face and said, Atlantis has existed for at least 1,000 years. It is obviously different compared to human cities. You can find lost magic in this place. Humans could capture our kind because there are too many of you. If they were to come here, I guarantee that they won't be able to return. I dare say that there is no other building in the outside world that is better preserved and stronger than ours. Watson smiled and did not say anything. Atlantis was indeed stronger than most human cities, but it was not at the strongest level. Mount Creation was definitely stronger than that place. When he saw the disbelief in Watson's smile, Owen pointed at a huge shell nearby and said, Don't doubt my words. Take that ocean pearl cannon as an example. It is engraved with powerful magic. It can be used to project huge pearls that can cause large-scale damage underwater. As long as it has sand in it, the huge pearl cannon will be able to produce new pearls. Well, there is an endless supply of sand here. The shell that Owen pointed was near the city. The giant half-closed shell, which was 100 meters wide, was on a cliff at the bottom of the sea. A thick and long cannon barrel extended out from its crack. Furthermore, we have huge jellyfishes that are unique to us. If one were stung by that thing, even a gold-tier elite would be immediately poisoned to death. Even a platinum-tier elite would not feel comfortable with the poison. Atlantis has thousands of similar jellyfish guarding the kingdom. Then, Owen pointed toward the sky above Atlantis. A few luminous jellyfish that were also hundreds of meters in size slowly floated past them. Those jellyfish were like giant protective umbrellas, defending Atlantis from attacks. Their luminous tentacles floated and swayed intimidatingly. Poseidon reached out to stop Owen from boasting about their city and asked Watson a question. As a young genius, Watson must have a clear understanding of humans' power. She wanted to know how Atlantis compared to the buildings on the land. Well, yes, some things do need improvements, Watson replied casually. His words immediately caused Owen to be displeased. Watson replied casually. His words immediately caused Owen to be displeased. Kid, you don't know what you're talking about. If we activate the defense system, do you think you'd be able to get into Atlantis safely? Owen looked at Watson provocatively. Watson only smiled and did not respond. It was not difficult for him to pass through the defense system with his full strength, but he did not need to reveal that. Poseidon did not continue to ask any more questions when Watson remained silent. She led them to Atlantis. Your Majesty. As soon as they reached the city, a few mermaids patrolling with harpoons walked up to them and bowed respectfully to Poseidon. They looked at Watson and the thousands of slaves curiously. These are my guests from ashore. They helped us to save Alice and the others. Find an empty palace in the city and drain the water with magic. Our guests can stay there. Poseidon gave her orders to the guards and then turned toward Watson. Watson, it may take a few days to find a palace and drain the water. During that time, you can stay with us at the Sea God's palace. There's no need to go through so much trouble, Your Majesty. Since I brought these people here, I should be responsible for their living space. Watson waved his hand and said, I need to change the environment here a little. I wonder if you would agree to that, Your Majesty. Poseidon nodded in agreement. What do you need to do? She knew that Watson must have thought her way was too inefficient. She would have to set up a magic circle to drain the palace and keep the seawater from submerging it again. She would have to put a lot of effort into making sure those land creatures could live freely and breathe easily. It might take her a few days to complete that. Did Watson have a better idea? When Poseidon nodded, Watson extended his right hand toward the underwater city. System fusion, activate. Then, the ground within a radius of hundreds of kilometers around Atlantis suddenly changed. It started to shake. The two underwater mountains were the first to shake and collide. The rocks on those mountains were very ordinary. However, during the collision, the two mountains transformed into rays of light that intertwined, turning into an even larger mountain that shone with a black iron luster. The ordinary rocks had turned into black iron tier rocks. That was not the end of it. More and more mountains collided, and the black iron tier rocks gradually upgraded into bronze and silver tier rocks. Finally, they turned into golden mountain peaks that emitted a golden luster. The golden mountain peaks stood at the bottom of the water. That scene shocked everyone so much that their mouths were agape. Soon, the golden mountains continued to merge under Watson's control. The original mountains became pillars that supported the palace. Some of the plankton and coral in the water were also merged into the palace, forming a colorful dome. In just a minute, 12 palaces that spanned dozens of kilometers appeared around Atlantis. Congratulations, Master, on the successful fusion. You have obtained a Platinum Tier building, 12 golden palaces. Platinum Tier building, 12 golden palaces. Effects. Starlight charging. Each palace is made of top-tier, gold-tier materials. The palace can absorb the starlight from the sky to provide energy. Water avoidance. The palace will expel the seawater and filter the oxygen. Cultivation enhancement. The cultivation speed in the palace will be increased by 100%. Self-healing. When the palace is damaged, it will absorb the energy to recover. Additional effect. 12 palaces array. Each palace can release starlight to activate a peak gold tier magical array to fight the enemy. The magical array can be combined to unleash a platinum tier power. As the 12 golden palaces were created, star charts appeared on each palace. One had the image of two fishes with their heads and tails connected, and one was a huge water bottle. Then, specific information about each palace before Watson. I'm not dreaming, am I? Owen rubbed his eyes and looked at the newly created 12 palaces. Those 12 palaces together were not any smaller than Atlantis. Watson's disdain toward Atlantis made him a little angry. When he realized that Watson wanted to create residences for the slaves, he had already planned to mock the youth if it were not good enough. However, he was dumbfounded when he saw the new palaces. Are those palaces real? Poseidon was also shocked. Her legs dissipated in a swarm of light and turned into a sky-blue fishtail. She swayed as she quickly arrived in front of the nearest palace with a dome flashing with the Capricornus star map. She extended her hand and touched it. The cold touch reminded Poseidon that everything was real. The palaces are now completed, and it's enough for thousands of people to live in them. It's even enough for their friends and family. However, just the palace is not enough. We should build a passage between each palace and the city of Atlantis so that the land creatures can move freely. Watson waved his hand again and activated the system fusion. However, he did fuse the terrain, but the ubiquitous seawater. Congratulations on the successful fusion, Master. You have obtained a gold-tier special structure, the Rainbow Bridge. 12 massive rainbow-colored bridges appeared in the direction of the palaces, with Atlantis as the center. Well, to be precise, 12 rainbow-colored pools of seawater had appeared. The seawater flowed continuously to form a bridge. Effects. Spatial teleportation. Entering the Rainbow Bridge can instantly reach any location on the bridge. Attraction of sea beasts. The Rainbow Bridge will attract the creatures in the ocean. The creatures that absorb the Rainbow Bridge's seawater will automatically become the bridge's guards. Additional effects. Aurora. The Rainbow Bridge will always emit a gentle light, illuminating the depths of the ocean. This is a success. Watson clapped his hands. Suddenly, he noticed that the people around him were looking at him with bizarre expressions. Don't look at me like that. This is a piece of cake for me. A piece of cake? That was the reason it was so scary. Everyone had similar thoughts about that. If Watson had spent a lot of effort to build those palaces and bridges, they would not have said anything about it. They were shocked because Watson had done it so easily. He had built 12 palaces that were as great as Atlantis. If Watson were serious, he could create something amazing. Chapter 352. The War Between Humans and the Sea Tribe. Have you heard? Her Majesty met a human guest outside of Atlantis, and he had only spent a few minutes building 12 palaces. He even used seawater to build more than 10 rainbow bridges. I've heard. Apart from that human guest, Her Majesty also brought thousands of slaves from the floating city. Previously, humans had always captured slaves from the Sea Tribe. This is the first time the Sea Tribe has brought back human slaves. I'm going to take a look at those palaces. They say that the magnificence of those palaces is not inferior to the most magnificent palace in Atlantis, the Sea God Palace. I'm going to see if the rumors are true. I'm going to. Bring me along. Those were the conversations of many of the sea folks in Atlantis. It had been almost an hour since Watson constructed the 12 golden palaces. Most of the sea folks had heard that a mysterious guest had arrived from ashore and changed the terrain of Atlantis with a single move. They had placed thousands of slaves in 12 palaces. Many sea folks were curious about that mysterious guest and wanted to meet him. Watson, who had settled the slaves at the new palaces, was invited by Poseidon to the Sea God Palace. Watson, the Sea God Palace is where I usually live. It might not be as good as the palaces you built, but I hope you can make do with it. Poseidon's tone was much more polite than when she had just brought Watson to the bottom of the sea. Watson looked at the scenery inside the Sea God Palace. The interior was mostly made of purple coral. Whether it was the bed or the tables and chairs, they were all made of high-quality purple coral. The walls around the palace were inlaid with pearls and gemstones. The palace was filled with seawater. All kinds of fish swam among the corals, making it seem very quiet. Brother Watson, let me show you my room. There's an empty guest room next to my room. You can stay there. After entering the Sea God Palace, Alice's legs had turned back into a sky-blue fishtail. She swayed her fishtail gently and went to Watson's side. She reached out and held Watson's hand. That scene caused Poseidon and Owen's eyes to flicker. They wanted to say something, but before they could say anything, a guard with a harpoon suddenly rushed in from the outside. With an anxious expression, he shouted, "Your Majesty, something terrible has happened." What happened? The mermaid said hurriedly. Hundreds of human fleets had appeared on the water surface above us. They're demanding that we hand them the slaves that we had captured from the floating city. I think they are from the Ptolemy family. They had injured many of our garrison guards too. They even said that if we don't let the slaves go, they will exterminate the Sea Tribe today. How arrogant. A few hundred human fleets want to exterminate the Sea Tribe? Ignore them. Tell garrison guards to retreat to Atlantis. Those humans can't do anything from the surface of the sea. If they dare to come down, I will make sure they never leave. Owen snorted coldly. I'm sorry, Watson. Go for a stroll with Alice in the Sea God Palace. I will check out the situation on the surface. Poseidon apologized to Watson and left with Owen. In an instant, only Watson, Alice, and Elena were left in the Sea God Palace. Watson looked thoughtful. As far as he knew, the Sea Tribe had 3 platinum-tier experts, and the strongest person in the Ptolemy family was only at the peak of gold tier. If it were not for fear of the Holy Dragon Kingdom, people from the floating city would have captured many more sea folks. The sea tribe would have attacked in retaliation and destroyed the floating city. Watson thought for a while and felt that the Ptolemy family was probably bluffing. He did not worry too much and followed Alice to the mermaid princess's room. Along the way, Alice excitedly introduced her life in Atlantis to Watson. "Brother Watson, my mother has never let me go ashore before. I once snuck out and picked up an extremely beautiful conch by the sea. Mother used magic to make that conch into a magical tool that can store sound. I hope that you can say a few words into it so that I can still hear your voice after you have left. Other than that conch, there are also many human things in my room. Those are all birthday gifts from Uncle Owen. Oh, and my birthday is approaching. I don't know what Uncle Owen is going to give me this time. Among all the gifts he gave me, my favorite is a storybook from the human world." Alice talked to Watson excitedly, as if she wanted to tell Watson all her experiences in the past 10 years. Her cute little face was filled with the naivety of a young girl of her age. Watson smiled and patted Alice's hair, which was smoother than satin. He was a little emotional. How could humans treat such a cute girl as a commodity? How could they capture and sell her? However, Alice did not hate the humans because of that. He hoped that the girl would always maintain that mentality. It would be great if different races in this world could coexist peacefully. That was not an easy matter. The hatred between humans and the sea tribe was deep-rooted. Not only were humans capturing and selling the sea folks, but the sea tribe would also kill humans without hesitation if they had the chance. Just like how Owen had saved Alice during the day, he had used the sea tribe's platinum tier secret skill to flood the Crystal Palace. He did not care how many people would be killed by such a move. He was the first human to befriend the sea folks and was invited to the Sea God Palace. He did not know if he could do anything to ease the hatred between the two races. Watson and Alice went to their rooms to rest. Outside of Atlantis, in the ancient and mysterious ocean kingdom, tens of thousands of sea folks armed with harpoons were ready to set off. Apart from mermaids, there were also humanoids with lobster or crab's lower extremities. They were all warriors from the sea tribes, especially those with a crab's lower extremities. They held weapons in both hands, and their lower had a hard shell for armor. They also had two giant pincers that looked like they could break steel. Everyone, be on your alert. Pay attention to the humans that might come from the sea surface at any time. No matter who comes down, we must kill them at the first opportunity we get. Owen had changed into a set of bright silver armor. A longbow condensed from seawater appeared in his hand. There were 3 water arrows on it. It was apparent that he was ready to cast the platinum tier secret skill, the sea spirit's breath. The huge shell cannon on the mountain peaks had opened its half-closed shell. The deep barrel inside was aimed toward the sky. Pearls wrapped in lightning were sent into the cannon barrel, ready to be fired at any time. Tens of thousands of sea folks waited quietly at the bottom of the sea until the sea surface was split open by hundreds of black shadows. Attention, the enemy is coming. No, that isn't the enemy. What are those? Owen raised his hand. He was about to order the sea folks around him to attack, but he realized something was wrong. Those were not the human soldiers he expected to cut through the sea's surface and enter the seabed. Instead, they were huge metal boxes that were several meters in perimeter. They did not know what was inside those boxes. There might be dangerous things in those boxes. Everyone, retreat, let the pearl cannons break those boxes. Owen looked at Poseidon, who was beside him. She took a step forward and ordered the soldiers to retreat. The pearl cannons on the mountain began to condense lightning and shoot out giant pearls one after another. The hardness of those pearls was not weaker than gold tier ores. With the enhancement of lightning magic, the power of each pearl was comparable to a peak gold tier spell. Boom, boom, boom. The cannonball hit the metal chest and immediately shattered it. A ball of fireworks exploded in the seawater, and a giant ball of thick black liquid spread in all directions from the shattered chest. Soon, it flooded into the seawater nearby. What is that thing? A marine warrior with a crab body was curious. He approached the black seawater, and it immediately stained his harder-than-steel crab legs. They gradually rotted. The marine warrior screamed and tried to retreat hurriedly. Unfortunately, it was too late. The rotten flesh quickly spread to his body. While he was running away, his body expanded like an inflatable balloon and exploded. Ink like blood splattered in all directions and splashed onto the bodies of several marine warriors. Then, their bodies also grew and exploded. Black liquid immediately filled a large area of the sea. Anyone who had contact with the black seawater exploded, creating a chain reaction that caused the sea tribe warriors who had been waiting to retreat. There was non-stop screaming. Run! Those boxes contain highly toxic potions. Don't get contaminated by those things, or we're dead. The sea tribe members retreated frantically while Poseidon and Owen's expressions darkened, especially Owen's. He gritted his teeth as he said, "That group of vile humans use such a despicable move like poison in a fight. I'll make all of you pay the price." He raised the longbow made of water elements in his hand and shot out 3 water arrows. He activated the sea folk's platinum tier secret skill, the sea spirit's breath. The black liquid that was rapidly spreading suddenly stopped. Instead, it converged toward the middle and turned into black whales. Hundreds of whales that were dozens of meters long carried millions of tons of seawater and rushed toward the surface of the sea. Chapter 353. Antonio made his move. Among the hundreds of ships docked on the surface of the sea, the leader of a sizable gold-tier ship, Casey, saw the pitch-black scene below in the deep water. He swallowed his saliva and turned to Daniel beside him. He said, "Father, it's not good to throw poison into the sea, right? Those potions are gold-tier poisons that we spent a lot of money to buy from the black market. 1 drop can kill an elephant, and we've brought tens of thousands of bottles of that poison. With so much poison, we might pollute the sea. And the lake priest is connected to the sea. Even if we kill the sea folks, the floating city will suffer too." The name of that poison was Black Plague. It was a poison that was very effective against living creatures. Any living creature infected with that poison would explode into black blood if they were not at least gold tier. Then, they would infect the next target. It was not wise for humans to fight against the sea tribes in the ocean, but poisoning them was different. Even if those poisons could not kill all the sea folks in the ocean, they could force them out of hiding. Those sea tribes had no chance of winning if they were to face humans whose numbers were 10 times more than them. "Casey, you didn't have any pity in your heart when you killed women so cruelly. Why are you worried that the seawater is polluted? If you're so worried, then go home and stay put. You know that you're still grounded. Father has been merciful to let you out." Mike, who was standing behind Daniel, mocked him. Among the 3 Ptolemy children, only Lana was not there. At that moment, Mike looked at Casey with disdain because he had already heard from his father that Casey was not the one who saved the floating city. Instead, he suspected that Antonio's disciple had disguised himself as Casey and did all that. However, Mike had already guessed that. His good-for-nothing brother had been decadent for more than 20 years, so how could he become so powerful? However, he was still a little uneasy. He was worried that his brother was ready to explode in one fell swoop to eliminate him and take the position of the future head of the family. He had been concerned when he was summoned back to the mansion. He only heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the truth from his father. Unfortunately, that made him even more disdainful toward Casey. It was not his contribution, yet Casey had claimed it so effortlessly. He did not even hesitate to give an autograph to others to prove that he was a true hero. As a result, the Ptolemy family could not refute the matter even if they wanted to do that. He would laugh if that got their family into trouble. "Eldest brother, what do you mean? Who harmed other women? I have no idea what you're talking about." Casey's eyes flickered, and he defended himself with a guilty conscience. He knew that his family knew what he had done, but he could not accept it if they said that in public. Did his brother not care about his dignity? The contempt in Mike's eyes hurt him deeply. His brother had been good to him just half a day ago. He did not even dare to speak harshly to Casey. It felt refreshing. However, the situation had reversed in just a few hours. The difference was unbearable. "It's all that B***starred Watson's fault. If I see him, I'll kill him." Casey glared at the blackened sea. At that moment, Casey was almost sure that Watson was the one who had saved the mermaids and the slaves in the city in his place. Watson was not in the floating city at that moment, so he must be with the sea folks. The Ptolemy family was there to seek revenge against the sea tribe. After all, the sea tribe had attacked the floating city. As the most prominent Ptolemy family in the city, they could not be quiet. On the other hand, they were also there to find Watson. Perhaps it was not Watson who had helped the sea folks. No matter who he was, he would undoubtedly show up in the fight. As long as they could find that person, the Ptolemy family would be able to prove that Casey was not the one who had done all those actions. They were scammed. Casey cursed Watson in his heart. He wanted nothing more than for Watson to appear in front of him immediately. Suddenly, there were ripples in the blackened seawater. Look, it looks like the sea folks are coming. It's just as Lord Daniel has predicted. Those sea folks won't be able to hold on for long. Silver and gold tier elites were pointing at the sea surface with relaxed expressions. Daniel had brought elites from his family and transferred soldiers from some of their family's affiliations. There were more than 100 gold tier warriors, thousands of silver tier elites, and countless bronze tier warriors. They would have no problem dealing with Atlantis if the city were not underwater. At that moment, the black sea water turned from ripples into surging waves that were hundreds of meters tall. Black whales dozens of meters long carried the highly toxic seawater rushed toward the ships. Protect Lord Daniel. When those black whales appeared, hundreds of gold tier elites immediately rose from Daniel's ship. Those elites included warriors, mages, archers, and priests. There were more than 20 of them in each class. The distribution was very uniform. The warriors released their combat aura and stood in front of the two young masters to protect them. Mages chanted spells to raise the sea into a protective barrier to block the black whales. As for the archers, they drew their bows and nocked their arrows. They fired a series of shots at Owen to prevent him from returning to the sea. The priests collectively cast the God's Blessings spell to enhance their companions' abilities. Under the cooperation of hundreds of gold tier elites, the black whales that Owen summoned finally disintegrated before they could hit Daniel's ship. On the other hand, the other vessels were unprotected. So, the black whales rammed into them with millions of tons of seawater. The men's bodies were stained with the poisoned black seawater and then exploded into black pus. Owen's furious attack had killed hundreds of people, but that was only a fraction of the entire troop. It did nothing for Daniel. On the other hand, because hundreds of people had died, the poison in the seawater became even denser. D*MN humans, die. The Sea Tribe's Platinum Tier secret skill, the Sea God's Finger. He waved his arms, and the seawater under his feet continued to rise before turning into a wall of water to block the arrows. Owen roared. The sea under his feet immediately turned into a vast vortex. The space in the vortex was constantly pulled as it became unstable, and an illusory finger without fingerprints emerged from the unstable space, gradually spreading upward. That finger was dozens of meters thick. Even though there were no fingerprints on the finger, it had mysterious wave-shaped patterns engraved on it. If the Sea Spirit's Breath was the strongest Platinum Tier large-scale spell that Owen had mastered, then that was the strongest single-target spell he had cultivated. The Sea God's Finger went straight for Daniel's ship. More than 20 gold-tier mages were responsible for releasing the protective shield, and they spat out mouthfuls of blood before they fell to the floor. Their protective shield was like a piece of fragile paper for the Sea God's Finger. It broke almost immediately. The 20 warriors in front of Daniel were even more miserable. Some of them were crushed into meat paste because they were too close to the finger. The finger could poke a hole in the sky, let alone a mere small ship. Owen was happy when he saw Daniel and the others were about to be crushed by the finger. Daniel took a handkerchief and wiped his subordinate's blood on his body. He said unhurriedly, "Master Antonio, I'll leave the rest to you." Swish. In an instant, the world seemed to have come to a standstill. A massive door made of layers of light wheels appeared in the sky. A gorgeous young man with platinum hair and a wooden cane walked out of it. The tumbling waves froze when he stepped on it. The Sea God's fingers, which rose constantly, trembled as if they were trying to break free from some cage. However, before the finger could break free, the young man stomped his feet. The Sea God's fingers, which could poke a hole in the sky, began to collapse, inch by inch, until it dissipated into nothingness. Owen, who had also come to a standstill, coughed the moment the Sea God's fingers dissipated. He spat out a large mouthful of blood and looked at the man in the sky in horror. Everything around him also resumed its flow, and the waves began to churn again. "You are Antonio? The greatest mage in the kingdom who has lived for more than 400 years. That Antonio? I did not expect to be so famous. Even the sea folks know me." Antonio descended from the sky and came to Daniel's ship. The huge light wheel behind him gradually disappeared. Master Antonio. Daniel bowed respectfully. I had planned to ask Mike to invite your disciple to our family to participate in the trial, but he could not find your disciple. I suspect that the sea folks had captured him. Please kill the sea folk elite so that we can get to Atlantis to save your disciple. We will help you. Well, we can go to the bottom of the sea. But if he is really there, then there's no need for me to save him. Antonio stroked his non-existent beard and chuckled. Daniel's expression changed. Master Antonio? Don't tell me that you sympathize with the sea tribe and don't plan to kill them? The sea folks had 3 platinum tier elites. The reason Daniel dared to attack that place was not that he had hundreds of gold tier warriors but because of Antonio. The oldest mage in the kingdom would not care about 3 platinum tier warriors. At the very least, it would ensure that the sea folks would not threaten him. Of course, other than using Antonio to fight against the sea folks, he also hoped that Antonio would find Watson at the bottom of the sea. That would prove that Casey did not do all those things. He did not expect Antonio to refuse him. Not to the extent of sympathizing with them. I can help you to get rid of the sea folk in front of you. However, I don't interfere with Watson's matters. I am an open-minded teacher who respects the thoughts of his disciple. Antonio was still smiling amiably. He raised a finger toward Owen in the distance. Platinum tier peak water elemental spell, myriad arrows, heavenly river flash. Chapter 354. The Sea Tribe Healer. Along with Antonio's voice, the already violent surface of the sea became even more violent. Balls of pitch black seawater evaporated, condensing into black clouds that turned into a black rain of arrows with lightning swirling around them. The rain of arrows was too dense. Each arrow exuded an aura that was no weaker than a peak gold tier weapon, causing everyone to hold their breath. Owen's face was filled with despair as he faced tens of millions of arrows, each comparable to a peak gold tier item, and was made of highly toxic seawater. He could not resist it. He could not even escape, let alone withstand it. That is the strength of the greatest mage of the human kingdom. Owen smiled bitterly and closed his eyes. As the #1 warrior of the sea folks, he had always been unconvinced of the elites from the land kingdom. The greatest mage in the kingdom could try to fight him underwater. They could see who would survive in the end. Unfortunately, he had met Watson, the freak, and then Antonio. The pride in his heart had been shattered to pieces. In the face of those 2 people, he would only be blasted to smithereens no matter where he was. Owen was prepared to meet his fate with the highly toxic seawater. However, the intense pain he had expected did not come. He opened his eyes. The black rain of arrows had flown over his head. It passed by him and landed on the surface of the sea thousands of meters away from him. After bombarding the wrong place, Antonio saw that the sea's surface beneath his feet had become much clearer. He pretended to be regretful and withdrew his hand. As expected, when one is old, one can't even cast spells accurately. Did he not cast spells accurately? That was clearly done on purpose. Casey cursed angrily in his heart. Antonio's magic range covered thousands of meters. Even a blind man could hit Owen if he came over, but Antonio had thrown his magic to other parts of the water dozens of meters away, so it was ridiculous not to explain it on purpose. What kind of kingdom's greatest mage is that? Why is he like my father? Cassie cursed in his heart again. His father, Daniel, was a protective person. No matter what trouble he caused outside, his father always had a way to clean up his mess. Previously, his father had hired people to suppress some of the women he had harmed. Watson had also caused trouble for the Ptolemy family, and his father had personally led some people to help him settle it. In his eyes, Antonio's actions were the same as Daniel's. Watson had plotted against the Ptolemy family. Antonio knew about it but did not say a word. It was very likely that Watson was involved with the sea folks. Antonio simply found an excuse to release Owen in front of everyone. Since your eyesight is not suitable to use magic, Master Antonio, you can stay here and protect everyone. Leave the rest to me. You can still protect us, right? Daniel was also outraged, but he still showed an amiable expression and asked Antonio politely. Antonio grabbed his walking stick and narrowed his eyes. It's not difficult for me to put up a protective shield. Don't worry. As he spoke, Antonio raised his hand and released a protective shield that covered Owen's body. It instantly broke through the dark sea surface that had become much fainter and disappeared into the seabed. Many guards on the ship wanted to say something, but they did not dare to say anything. They did not think as much as Daniel. In their eyes, Antonio might have really lost his mind. He could even place a protective shield on the enemy, which worried them about their own safety. However, given Antonio's identity, they could only endure. Only a small number of people could see Antonio's real intention and fell into deep thought for a moment. With Master Antonio's help, the sea tribes in that sea area should not appear for the time being. Quote, "Let's go back, Mike. From tomorrow onward, you have to come here every day to spray poison until those sea folks can't bear it, and they'd have to go ashore." "Oh, right, since Master Antonio's eyes are not very sharp, when I return to the mansion, I will invite the best healer in the city for you, Master Antonio. I guarantee that your eyes will be cured." He glared at the sea, which was gradually returning to normal. Then, Daniel said something and signaled the fleet to return. Antonio heard his words and did not seem to understand what he meant. He just looked up at the sky leisurely and hummed a song. Underwater, the sea god palace. "Owen, you have to hold on. I have ordered the healers to come here. They will help you." Poseidon held Owen's hand with a worried look on her face. Her beautiful eyebrows were tightly locked together. Owen lay on the coral bed in Poseidon's room in the sea god palace. The coral bed was covered with glowing ribbons. They were gently pressed onto Owen's wounds to prevent them from bleeding. "Don't worry about me, Poseidon." He coughed. Owen's pale face forced a smile. He wanted to say something, but suddenly he sat up and coughed violently before he vomited 2 large mouthfuls of blood that scattered into the surrounding seawater. "Owen." Poseidon quickly supported Owen's body. Her face was on the verge of crying. "It's okay, Poseidon. If I die, you can bury my body here and then relocate with everyone else. Relocate to a deeper part of the ocean to find a tribe that can accept us. As long as we are far away from the humans, we will not be in danger, even though that will disappoint Alice. I have 2 regrets in my life. One is Alice, and the other is you. My only wish is to hear you say that you love me before I die." Owen raised his hand to touch Poseidon's face. Before he could touch it, his palm drooped weakly. He had suffered 2 serious injuries. One was when he was fighting Watson. He was hit by the invincible fist. Even though it was a simple technique, the indomitable will in the invincible fist made his blood boil. The second time was when he was fighting Antonio. The man had paused time and crushed his platinum tier secret skill, causing him to suffer a severe backlash. The combination of the 2 types of injuries caused him to be on the verge of death. "Owen, you did not let me down. I'm the one who should say sorry. I love you. I've loved you for a long time." Poseidon grabbed Owen's fingers and pressed them against her face as she cried. She and Owen were childhood friends. She knew that Owen had liked her since she was young, but it was a pity that she had fallen for another person. Her husband had been killed in the previous confrontation with the humans, and Owen had been by her side all those years. He had treated Alice as his own child and made up for her missing fatherly love. Owen was about to leave, and she could not hold it in anymore. She did not know how Alice would react if she knew about that. "Uncle Owen, I heard that Uncle Owen is injured. Where is he? Let me see him quickly." Just as she was worried, Alice's voice suddenly came from outside. Then, Alice rushed into the room and saw Owen lying in Poseidon's arms on the verge of death. Alice rushed forward and hugged Owen's neck tightly. Tears slid down the corner of her eyes and disappeared into the surrounding seawater. "Uncle Owen, what happened? Don't leave me, don't die. I won't let you die. Alice, I know how you feel, but your Uncle Owen is not dead. If you continue to press on him, he might die." Watson had also followed Alice into the room and glanced at Owen. "What, is Owen really dead?" "But he just..." Poseidon was stunned. She wanted to say that Owen's palm had fallen when he was in the middle of speaking. Was that not a sign of death? Ahem. Before she could figure it out, Owen coughed and opened his eyes. He glared at Watson. It was apparent that Owen had not died. He had only pretended to be dead to listen to the truth about his beloved. Watson ignored Owen's angry stare. On the contrary, Alice was very excited. She let go of the hand wrapped around Owen's neck and smiled through her tears. "So Uncle Owen is fine. That's great. I can't say that he's fine. He's fine now, but he'll die later," Watson added. What? Alice walked up to Watson worriedly. She reached out and tugged at the corner of his shirt. She pleaded with him. Brother Watson, please save my uncle. Even though Uncle Owen has caused you a lot of trouble previously, I hope you won't mind and can help heal him. If you can cure Uncle Owen, I'm willing to do anything you want me to do. That ignited Owen's anger. What do you mean I've caused a lot of trouble? Alice, whose side are you on? Watson, you annoying brat, there's nothing for you to do here. Go wherever you want to go. One moment you're saying that I'm not dead, the next moment, you're saying that I'm not going to live for long. Do you think you're some kind of godly doctor? We have specialized healers. We don't need a human like you to tell us what to do. Watson shrugged in response to Owen's words. He had wanted to help Owen for Alice. However, after seeing Owen's firm request, he decided to wait for the Seafolk's healers to arrive. He also wanted to see how good they were. After waiting for a few minutes, the healers arrived. The leader was a beautiful woman in a white robe with 8 octopus tentacles on the lower half of her body. Her expression was somewhat gloomy. Her black curly hair floated in the seawater. She held the root of a seaweed that was as thin as a toothpick in her mouth. That beautiful lady exuded a powerful aura that was equivalent to that of a platinum-tier elite. She was the Sea Tribe's 3rd platinum-tier elite, Janna, known as the Sea Holy Priest. She was also the most outstanding healer in the entire Sea Tribe. Chapter 355, Absolute Healing. Owen, you're so lame. You were beaten up because you went out on a trip. It seems like the 3 platinum-tier sea folks will soon become 2. Janna opened her mouth, revealing a mouth full of beautiful serrated teeth. Shut up, Janna, such venomous tongue. Hurry up and heal my injuries. If you have anything to say, wait until I'm better. Swish. Owen groaned with difficulty. The dozens of tentacles under Janna's feet immediately rose. Each tentacle held a surgical tool, either scissors or a saw, and cut down on Owen's body. Platinum-tier healing technique, lingering sound of pain. The dozens of surgical tools turned into tens of thousands of phantoms, cutting over Owen's body. Owen did not seem to have changed at all, but he looked like he was in pain. Since he was a peak platinum-tier elite, he had seen all of Janna's movements. Janna's arms moved very quickly. Often, the surgical tools cut through Owen's body, and before the blood could seep out, she would sew it up with a needle and thread. As for Janna's method of treatment, it was very simple, which was to bleed Owen. While she operated on Owen, Janna's subordinates brought a large bucket and placed it by the bedside. The bucket was filled with bright red blood with a barbaric aura. To the sea folks, blood was the seawater that flowed in their bodies. It was a sacred substance. If that substance were contaminated, the sea folks would get sick. Therefore, changing the blood of the sick was a suitable method of treatment. The healer would prepare clean sea beast blood in advance to replace the blood in the patient's body during the treatment process. Owen, I have replaced most of the contaminated blood in your body. Next, you need to sincerely pray to the sea god and let him grant you a full recovery. Do you still feel unwell? If you feel fine, then I will deal with the seawater around Atlantis. Those despicable humans had poisoned the seawater. Aren't they afraid? After all, the sea is connected to the lake, where they are located. They can't live well even if there are problems here. She put away all the tools she had just used for the surgery. No one knew where she hid them. I feel much better. Owen stood up from the coral bed and stretched his arms a few times. He looked at Watson proudly. What did I tell you? I don't need your treatment at all. We have many good healers here. Wow. As soon as he finished speaking, Owen suddenly knelt on the ground and spat out a large mouthful of blood. His face was filled with disbelief. What's going on? Janna had planned to leave with her subordinates. When she saw Owen's discomfort, she walked toward him and stretched a tentacle on Owen's head. Her gloomy expression changed slightly. It's not good, Owen. Your body has been corroded by a strong warrior's power and is riddled with holes. You need to change your blood, your internal organs, and your bones as well. That way, we can still save your life. However, there is a side effect. What side effect? Your strength will decrease. If you are lucky, it will only decrease to gold tier. If you are unlucky, you will be an ordinary folk from now on. Blood, bones, internal organs, those are a person's main components. If all those were replaced, would that person still be himself? Janna's words made Owen's face pale. He gritted his teeth and said, "Forget it. Just let me die like this." He would rather die as a platinum tier elite than become a powerless, ordinary person. Seeing his companions suffering and unable to do anything, the feeling of powerlessness would make him feel even more tormented. It was not just Janna. Everyone there, including Poseidon, had sorrowful looks on their faces. They could understand Owen's choice. If they were Owen, they would have made the same decision. However, could they really let Owen die like that? Just as everyone was in a dilemma, Alice's voice suddenly sounded in the room. "Brother Watson, didn't you say that you have a way to save Uncle Owen? I don't know what method you're talking about, but would he be able to keep his strength? No matter what, I hope that you can try." Everyone turned their gazes to Watson. That was the first time that Janna had seen Watson. She spat out the seaweed root in her mouth and asked, "Who is this?" "He is Her Majesty's friend from ashore and also the person who saved Princess Alice. The 12 golden palaces that appeared outside Atlantis were his handiwork." One of the octopus underlings explained it to Janna. They knew that Janna liked to hide in her room, dissecting things or researching healing spells. She rarely went out and did not know much about the outside world. "So you are the person who changed Atlantis. From the looks of it, you seem to be a healer too?" Janna asked with interest. Watson only smiled. "I'm not a healer. I just know a little about that. Can you guys talk later? I'm dying." Owen's voice interrupted the conversation between the two. He looked at Watson with a conflicted expression. "Watson, are you sure you can heal me without leaving any side effects?" If not for the fact that the young man had created 12 palaces that were no weaker than Atlantis, he would not have dared to let him try it. Owen felt a faint glimmer of hope in his heart. Perhaps that youth could trigger a miracle. "I'm not sure. I can only try my best. Regardless of whether it works or not, it can't be any worse." "Come on." Owen steeled his heart and closed his eyes. System fusion. Watson opened his right hand toward Owen, and several platinum tier gods' blessings surged in his mind. Those gods' blessings were left behind by the elites who had once challenged the world transformation mirror. Before that, he had only casually used them to recover his physical strength and increase his power. He would have to fuse the blessings that had healing and recovery effects together. "Congratulations on a successful fusion, Master. You have obtained a Diamond Tier spell, Absolute Healing. Diamond Tier spell, Absolute Healing, can heal all injuries in the world, including external, internal, sword, poison, and so on. It can also heal the person to their peak strength." The Diamond Tier spell had appeared in Watson's head following the fusion, and he had a confident expression on his face. Owen's healing was made even easier for him by his mastery of the many spells he had learned. Absolute Healing. As he cast the Absolute Healing spell on Owen's body, the man fell to the ground weakly. His constant coughing immediately stopped. A rosy complexion appeared on his body. He could even stand up abruptly and clench his fists in surprise. "The uncomfortable feeling is gone. My injuries seem to have recovered." "Owen, are you sure that you've really recovered? It won't be the same as before, right? Where it's only temporary." Poseidon was concerned. Owen shook his head. "No, Your Majesty, I've recovered this time. Not only have I improved, but my strength has also recovered to its peak. If you don't believe me, see me run, jump, and somersault." Waving his fishtail, Owen nimbly somersaulted a few times in the sea. Everyone was confident that he had recovered. "Now, I can leave the seabed and fight against the human fleet for 300 rounds. Owen clenched his fists. A platinum tier aura spread from his body, causing the entire sea god palace to shake. "Owen, you've just recovered from your injuries. You should rest so that you don't get injured again when you fight with others." Janna curled her lips in disdain. Her gaze landed on Watson's body and flickered. She walked toward Watson and stretched a tentacle to wrap around Watson's neck. "Your name is Watson? It seems that you're very skilled in healing techniques. Would you be interested in going to my room later to have a deeper discussion with me?" As she spoke, Janna's face moved closer to Watson's ear and blew into it. Even though Janna had a mouth full of sharp teeth and a gloomy expression, she still looked pretty good. Her actions were full of temptation. Alice, who was at the side, saw that scene and immediately ran up and pulled Janna's tentacle away. "Aunt Janna, Brother Watson is visiting me. We can't go to your room." Janna was stunned by Alice's actions. She looked at Alice and then at Watson before she revealed a look of understanding. I'm sorry, I didn't know the two of you were in a relationship. Then, she moved closer to Watson's ear and lowered her voice. It doesn't matter even if you're with the princess. I don't mind sharing. Why don't you think about it? Watson did not answer her. He just smiled bitterly. Watson, thank you so much. Not only did you save my daughter, but you also healed Owen. The sea folks owe you a huge favor. Poseidon walked toward Watson and grabbed his hand gratefully. Her fishtail moved very fast because of her excitement. It's okay. It's just a piece of cake. Even though the sea tribe has survived this time, if the humans from the floating city continue to poison the sea, we will not be able to resist eventually. Furthermore, the floating city is guarded by platinum-tier powerhouses. It's not rational to fight them head-on. Are we really going to move to the depths of the sea? Poseidon looked troubled. As a sea tribe that relied on the sea to live, there was a reason their ancestors built the Altantis at the sea entrance. Humans were better at using tools compared to the sea tribes. They had a greater variety of goods and crafts that were located near the land. They had free access to the land and could come and go as they pleased to exchange products. However, the humans' widespread hunting of sea folks had resulted in a decline in trade with them. The sea tribes, on the other hand, continued to have access to human items. An illustration of that would be Alice's priceless fairy tale book. If they wanted to retreat into the depths of the sea, although it was safe, it would also cut off the possibility of communication with the outside world. Or should we hand over those slaves? I heard that the reason those people attacked us was that these slaves are in our hands. All of a sudden, one of the underlings behind Jenna weakly interjected. As soon as her voice fell, the atmosphere instantly changed. Some of the sea folks looked at Watson with sparkling eyes. They felt that the humans were to blame for their predicament, but they did not dare to target Watson because he had healed Owen. Plus, if those slaves were to leave, then the 12 golden palaces would be theirs. We can't do that. Watson gave us these slaves. He is our benefactor. How can we do that to him? Unexpectedly, the first person to stand up for Watson was Owen. He said, furthermore, the slaves were just an excuse for these humans. They are asking for slaves now. When we hand over the slaves, they might ask for treasures again. The greed of humans will never disappear. Therefore, we have to nip this in the bud. For example, destroy the floating city. Chapter 356. Watson's New Trial. When Owen mentioned the destruction of the floating city, his eyes were filled with the flames of revenge. His words shocked all the sea folks, and they began to discuss it worriedly. Can we really destroy the floating city? Even if we can do it, the floating city is an important part of the Holy Dragon Kingdom. What if the kingdom is angry and sends a large number of troops to destroy us? Owen waved his hand. Destroy the floating city. I didn't say kill everyone in the floating city. I mean to kill their leader and then turn the remaining humans into slaves and bring them back here. We can let those human slaves make the necessary things for us, such as porcelain, tea, and silk. We can kill those who won't obey us, just like what they did to us in the past. With those human slaves, we can move Atlantis to the deeper parts of the sea and obtain the necessary resources. Then, we won't need to be afraid of the kingdom. His words were full of charisma, and it was not a terrible plan. Many of them were moved. Owen turned to look at Watson. Watson, I did not treat you very well before because you were a human. But you saved me, and I apologize for my past rudeness. Even though you're a human, you're a respectable one. I hope you can help us with the attack on the floating city. You've seen all the evil that those despicable humans have done to us. As long as you help us, you'll be a member of the Sea Tribe from now onward. I'll convince Her Majesty to let you marry Alice. According to the rules of the Sea Tribe, humans were not allowed to enter the Sea Tribe's cities, and they were also not allowed to live with them. However, if Watson married Alice, then it would be different. She was the future Sea Emperor, and if he married her, Watson would be equivalent to the tribe's royalty, one of their emperors. He could also change his race from a human to a member of the Sea Tribe. Uncle Owen, don't talk nonsense. I don't have that kind of relationship with Brother Watson. Alice was frightened by Owen's words. She fiddled with the corners of her clothes, and her face was red. Alice, as someone who has watched you grow up, how can I not understand your thoughts? Owen shook his head. He looked at Watson with a sincere gaze. What do you think, Watson? Are you willing to agree to my request? If you agree to it, You can also bring your family and friends to live in the 12 golden palaces that you've just created. From then on, we can live a carefree life under the sea." Owen felt that the conditions he gave were excellent. He would let Watson be the tribe's emperor, and he would let him bring outsiders into the sea tribe. Owen had broken so many of their rules, but he felt that Watson was worth it. Judging from the fact that Watson had instantly created 12 huge palaces and was able to heal a condition that even Jana would find difficult to cure, Owen knew that the young man was a rare talent. If he could join the sea folks, their strength would increase by many folds. Alice and Watson's children would also have great genes. They would be geniuses. The sea folks might replace the humans to be the largest race in the world. Watson thought for a moment before he shook his head. "Thank you for your kindness, but I can't accept that." Owen's expression darkened. "You're not satisfied with such generous conditions? Then what do you need from us? Unless you have a problem with living with the sea folks." Alice, who was at the side, also clenched her fists. She looked at Watson with some worry, as if she was afraid that Watson would reject her. "That has nothing to do with race. It's just that I have many relatives and friends. The 12 golden palaces might not be able to fit all of them. Furthermore, I came to the floating city just for a trial. After the trial ends, I will head to the royal city to attend school. I'm very grateful for your offer, but allow me to apologize for I can't accept it." "Watson, are you kidding me? I can understand you saying that you want to go to the royal city to study. But having so many family and friends that the palaces can't fit all of them? It's bad to lie." "I'm not lying. If you don't believe me, I can take you to see my home." "Forget it, we're not in the mood. Watson, if you're not willing to help us, then please leave. We don't want to have an unstable factor by our side while we're at war with the humans." Owen's expression turned completely cold. Since Watson rejected his generous offer, it proved that Watson's heart was with the humans. There was nothing more to say. "Uncle Owen, I believe in Brother Watson's character. He will not do anything to harm us. Please don't chase him away." Alice walked toward Owen to plead with him, but Owen was unmoved. There was nothing she could do, so Alice went to her mother. "Mother, please persuade Uncle to let Brother Watson stay." "I'm sorry, Alice. Your Uncle Owen did the right thing. If he doesn't want to be part of the sea folks, we can't let him stay here. We should not even let those slaves stay. Young Master Watson, it seems like I can't discuss the treatment with you. If you choose to stay here, I can let you experience a special service." The tentacles under Jana's body squirmed non-stop. One by one, surgical tools rose. Her face was filled with regret, causing Watson to smile bitterly. "Thank you all for inviting me to Atlantis as a guest. After I leave, I will try my best to prevent the Ptolemy family and the people from the floating city from harming you." After bowing to the sea folks in front of him, Watson hesitated for a moment before turning around and leaving. Alice threw herself into her mother's arms. She cried, and the tears fell to the ground with a crisp sound. The tears that flowed out of the corners of her eyes froze before falling to the ground. They turned into milky white, crystal-clear pearls. Poseidon patted her daughter's shoulder. She looked reluctant. "Alice, forget about him. Watson is still a human, after all. You won't have a good ending with him. Alice, there is no time for you to be sad. We have to think about how to destroy the floating city. Don't worry, Watson doesn't want to join the sea folks because he has a natural sense of superiority as a human. If we destroy the floating city and let him see how his companions fall into our hands, we will see how he can refuse the offer. At that time, I will personally tie him up and bring him to you." The corners of Owen's mouth rose as he spoke, seemingly full of confidence. It was already afternoon when Watson returned to the hotel. As soon as he entered the hotel, he saw a short-haired woman rush out and hug him. "Young Master Watson, you're finally back. I heard from Master Antonio that the sea folks had captured you. I was worried about what would happen if you did not come back. Why would I do that? It's so boring there. Plus, I can't part with you, Nightingale, and my other companions." Watson patted the girl's hair playfully, causing the girl to raise her head in dissatisfaction. "You look good, young Master Watson. They must have treated you well. I heard that most of the sea folks are beautiful women. Did they serve you?" "They wanted to, but I rejected them." Watson recalled the tentacles on Jana's body and Alice's reluctant look. He shook his head. "Forget it, let's not talk about that. I'm going to see Master." I wonder where he is now. Master Antonio is sunbathing on the roof. Watson teleported to the roof and found Antonio on a rocking chair with a sun hat on his face. His body swayed gently with the chair. He looked very relaxed. Master. Watson bowed respectfully toward Antonio. Watson, you're finally back. What do you think about your trip to the Sea Tribes? Quote, the Sea Tribe has a unique ecological environment and living habits. Many of their places are different from the land, but there are many similar places. But, I only had one thought after leaving the Sea Tribe. Why can't humans and the Sea Tribe coexist peacefully? Obviously, the Sea Tribe did not take the initiative to invade the land. Why would the floating city's noblemen always capture the Sea Tribe as slaves? So that hatred can grow? Benefits can drive people crazy. Furthermore, Watson, do you think that if the position of the humans and the Sea Tribe were reversed, they would not capture the human slaves? Not necessarily. There is a very philosophical saying in the kingdom that non-humans have different hearts. The strong would always have the right to set rules and take those rules for granted. The Sea Tribe is oppressed because they are not strong enough. If they are strong enough, then they will resist the humans. Perhaps they might be even more radical than the humans. In fact, the Sea Tribe is already prepared to resist. Soon, the floating city will be filled with rivers of blood. Is there no way to stop the war between the two races? There is, and it is very simple. Antonio took off the sun hat on his face and revealed a meaningful smile. As long as you can convince the two races and make them strong enough. Watson, do you think you are strong enough? Watson pondered for a long time and then smiled. Yes, Master, I'm strong enough. Since you think so, I'll add one more item to the test. Prevent the Sea Tribe from starting a war with the humans, and you need to find a new order for them. If you can't do it, you'll be severely punished. Don't worry, Master, I will not let you down. By the way, Master, the phrase, non-humans have different hearts, that you just said sounds very familiar to me. I wonder which philosopher in the kingdom had said that? Antonio pointed at himself with a smug expression. Me, of course. Chapter 357. 10,000 Clones. Young Master Watson, that is the location of the sea god's trident. It is also the place where you will participate in the trial. Mike led Watson to a secret house in a small alley in the Crystal Palace. Following the house down was a small secret room. Half a day ago, the Crystal Palace had just been severely damaged, but nothing seemed to have happened here. The wall covered by magic was still smooth, and there was a sentry post every 10 steps. Half an hour after Watson and Antonio talked, Watson immediately went to the Ptolemy family. He told them that he would participate in the trial, and the Ptolemy family sent the eldest young master, Mike, to bring him there. Even though Mike knew that Watson was the one who replaced Casey, he was still polite toward him. After all, Watson was Antonio's disciple, and his strength was not bad at all. He could not afford to offend him, so he did not mention that. After Watson replaced Casey, his brother had become trash in his father's eyes. Watson had helped him, so he had a good impression of the young man. When young Master Watson enters that place to train, guard it well to prevent anyone from disturbing him. Otherwise, if anything happens, I will teach you a lesson. Yes, young master, we will guard that place well. The guards took a step forward nervously. Their bodies emitted a gold-tier aura as they straightened their backs. Nodding in satisfaction, Mike led Watson to the front door of the basement and fiddled with the complicated lock on the door. That is the most important place for our family. Just the entrance alone has 9 layers of protection. It is magic that only enables those from our family's blood to enter. I guarantee that no one will be able to access this place. Is that so? While Mike was working on the 6th layer of the password, Watson pushed the door in front of him. His magic unlocked the subsequent layers of the password. Isn't it open? As Watson spoke, the door opened with a creak. Mike grumbled in his heart. The door was not as safe as his father had said. He would need to ask his father to strengthen the password again. He would make the 9-layered password into one with 99 layers. As the two entered, the scene in the secret chamber appeared in Watson's eyes. There was a long staircase extending to the front of the secret chamber. There was an endless abyss under the stairs where a sky-blue trident floated in the air. The trident was wrapped in a golden dragon-shaped sculpture. It emitted a flickering light as if it was breathing. As it breathed, The seawater below continued to rise and fall. It was poured into the black holes on the walls around the abyss in an orderly manner. The holes on the walls were densely packed and varied in size. At a rough glance, there were at least 1,000,000 of them. Those holes were all the underground waterways of the floating city. The ends of all the waterways were connected to that place. Young Master Watson, aren't you surprised that the operation of the floating city is all dependent on a platinum tier item? That is inevitable. I felt the same when I first came here. A platinum tier item can provide an endless supply of energy for an entire city. If there were more such items, it would not be impossible for the entire country to become omnipotent. Mike cast a burning gaze at the sea god's trident, his face filled with pride. The Ptolemy family had a platinum tier item that could change the environment of the kingdom. What an honor it was. Young Master Mike is right. Platinum tier items are indeed very powerful, especially that of sea god's trident. It's even stronger than an ordinary platinum tier item. Watson nodded, and the specific information of the sea god's trident appeared in front of him. Platinum tier item. Sea god trident, imitation. Effect. This item is an imitation of the real sea god's trident. It only has part of the functions of the original trident. Water flow creation, can create seawater out of thin air. Elemental decomposition, can decompose the controlled seawater into minor water elements. Sea god's wrath, summons the projection of the sea god, causing platinum tier large-scale damage. Tyrant's breath, sets up a thunderstorm vortex in the sky, making it impossible for birds to pass through. Additional effect. Body sensing, there is a connection between the fake sea god's trident and the real one. The host will be alerted when the distance is close. This sea god's trident is actually a replica, but it has powerful functions. It's hard to imagine what the real one can do. Watson sighed in his heart. He heard Mike beside him say, "Young Master Watson, I'm going to take that sea god's trident away next. I'll have to trouble you to complete the trial on behalf of the sea god's trident. During that period, I'll stand guard at the side. If you have any questions, you can call me." Okay, then. Mike walked to the edge of the steps and chanted a spell over the abyss below. Soon, the trident was triggered by the sound of the spell. It shook and stopped the flow of water from the hole in all directions. It began to fly to the top of the abyss, where it fell into Mike's hand. The moment he held the trident, Mike could not suppress the excitement on his face. He was like an emperor, but he quickly suppressed that emotion and carefully inserted the trident into a protruding stone platform not far from the steps. At the same time, he made a polite gesture to Watson. "Young Master Watson, please." Without hesitation, Watson jumped into the abyss. As he floated in the abyss, he immediately felt countless requests coming from the caves in all directions. Some were requests from the city gates for him to open the gates and release the water. Some were requests for him to change the river course, and some were requests for fishermen to bathe at home. He hoped that he could provide warm bathwater. Those requests were transformed into commands that instruments and magic could understand. They entered his mind, causing his brain to buzz. The sea god's trident usually handles so many things without making any mistakes. Such computing power is truly terrifying. As expected of a platinum tier item, Watson activated his magic according to the request in his mind. A huge water elemental law domain spread out under his feet. At the same time, Watson used the ability to serve his words. The water elements in the air gathered spontaneously and condensed into 9 thick water dragons that wrapped around his body. The water dragons' bodies separated into thin streams of water and entered different caves on the walls. Initially, he was not very familiar with the flow of water in the city. After all, the city was his body here, and the water flow was also his body. Some problems that he would not normally encounter when casting magic were also revealed at that moment. In the bathroom of a fisherman's house in the floating city, the fisherman's wife was taking a shower in the bathroom when she suddenly screamed. What happened? The fisherman immediately rushed into the bathroom and saw a shocking scene. The water pipe in the bathroom seemed to come to life as it twisted randomly on the wall, and water was 10 times larger than before gushed out of it. A few goldfish appeared along with the water flow, turning the bathroom into a pond. In another place, a few children were sprinkling their feed on the fishes in a pond in a certain aristocrat's manner. They laughed incessantly when the fishes fought for the food. Then, the water in the pond suddenly began to decline. Together with the fishes in the pond, they flowed toward the pipe and disappeared within a few seconds. At the west gate of the floating city, the gate was slowly opening. The guard who opened the gate had just signaled for a merchant fleet to sail out. The water current pushed the ships that were supposed to leave the city quickly. However, they were pushed back by the current outside the gate, causing the vessels to crash into each other. The noblemen on the ships scolded their subordinates as their subordinates defended themselves. Such a scene was not uncommon in a floating city at that moment. Watson was, after all, a human. It was difficult for him to process millions of different pieces of information simultaneously without making any mistakes. That Watson is a monster, right? Mike guarded the sea god's trident and looked down along the stairs. He clicked his tongue discreetly when he saw the 9 giant dragon-shaped water balls that surrounded Watson and the empty water currents that kept entering the surroundings. Before he left, Daniel had explicitly told him that if Watson had any problems during the trial, he should immediately replace Watson with the sea god's trident to maintain the city's stability. However, Watson had already started to supply energy to the city for a few minutes. There were no guards outside to report the problem. Obviously, what Watson had done was not too big of a problem. If he was not a monster, then what was that? It was shocking enough to see Watson's energy could support the entire city. While Mike was lamenting, Watson closed his eyes to improve the energy supply to the city. The energy contained in my body is enough to provide the functions of this city and even far more than that. However, I am unable to provide energy perfectly. In the past, when he made a move against the enemy, he always let his energy rush out in one direction. Even though it was powerful, it lacked change. However, at that moment, he had to split his energy into thousands of strands. Those thousands of strands of energy might have different directions, and after a certain transmission distance, some of the energy in different directions had to gather. Such a complex change forced Watson to make use of all the knowledge in his mind. He had previously absorbed a large amount of knowledge from the cultivators in the underground maze. After he had fused that knowledge, he had transformed it into the Einherjar and several diamond-tier abilities. For example, the Invincible Fist. However, that did not mean that he had utterly digested the knowledge in the Einherjar's body. Usually, he needed to think for a while before doing something. However, at that moment, to support the entire city by himself, he had squeezed out every bit of knowledge in the Einherjar's body and gradually fused it into his body. As he fused it with his ability to control the water flow, it significantly increased. The Einherjar's body contained the experiences of millions of cultivators, and those experiences included all kinds of methods to purify energy. All the helpful knowledge was fused into Watson's system and turned into his own. As a large amount of information poured into his body, it was continuously fused and upgraded. At one point, the accumulated knowledge reached its peak, forcing him to open his eyes. He spat out a few words.